Hello and welcome to the Weekly Shonen Jump Review. Each week I read Weekly Shonen Jump and give my review of the chapters. As a reminder of my format, I will provide a brief summary of the series that I read, followed by some quick thoughts of the chapters, and then at the end of the video I will do a overall ranking as if I am turning in the surveys. I don't cover all of the series in this review as I have dropped some of the series, but for those that I do, there will be some spoilers, so you have been warned. Check the table of contents for series that you don't want to have spoiled. Imu is preparing to descend, but Mary Jo is still going through the food crisis, which is a problem for York, who is potentially regretting her decision to betray everyone. Meanwhile, we go back to Elbath, and the Thorn Man was recaptured by Gerd before he could continue combining. Zoro and the Giants also found a steel heart, which seems like it may be important to keeping them alive. Luffy and Loki are trying to eat frozen food when suddenly great black pillars appear throughout Elbath. Those pillars form a magic circle up in the sky, which shoots a bolt of lightning into the main castle, signaling Imu's appearance. Also, some strange things were happening with the houses and something musical was happening. Then we finally get to see Imu and what he really looks like, and there is a lot that is going on. He has a similar black ring like Luffy in Gear 5 form, and he looks like he might be the same race as King, maybe? Although he doesn't really have the wings, so it's probably a different race that we're not familiar with, that he alone is the person, but in any case, a lot of stuff is going on. It's going to be very interesting to see what we learn about him. Also, his fruit is the devil's fruit, which is very interesting. Man, what is going to happen now that he has landed in Elbath? How strong is Imu, and what does his power fully do, especially when he is actually present? Yeah, also, he sounds like he is a Vivi simp, which is funny. So many questions, but we are really getting to the heart of the matter now. This is a very monumentous occasion in One Piece that we have finally seen the actual visage of this shadowy figure that, we've only seen this shadow for so long. This is a big moment in the series, and I'm very much looking forward to what it will mean going forward, and also what it means for having Elbath be towards the end of the whole thing. Maybe we're much closer to the end of this story than even we realize. This week, we have two mysterious strangers in town, and to avoid any potential for disaster, Marigold sends Descartes and the crew out shopping in the town. It is there we have both some high-quality humor and news of a Descartes imposter. The imposter is besmirching the great Descartes' name by pretending to steal food, but it doesn't last long, naturally, as the two mysterious men show up and appear to steal the magic that the imposter was using to intimidate people. Interesting potential power system implications, but they seem to know Descartes and will be connecting soon with Descartes and the gang. Another good chapter for Ichi the Witch this week, and I am interested in the implications of those magic keepers, including how their power works and what they are actually doing. Good and fun chapter to relax to this week. Akane begins her rendition of the God of Death, and it is clear that she is a professional and is bringing her A-game despite all of the pressure that has been put on her by the occasion and by Afro Man. In fact, she is doing everything she can to feed the flames of the audience before we finally, at the end of the chapter, get to see her depiction of the God of Death. And what we see is a stunning view. Her vision of the world is intensely photorealistic. So much so, but her God of Death seems kind of cartoony, and her eyes are doing something interesting in the final panel. I absolutely love what the mangaka is doing here. The two-page spread combo of what basically looks like a photo with Akane's God of Death was a breathtaking surprise. The suspense has been building so much that there is going to be an explosion in the next chapter. Even so, I think this chapter is going to make me do something that I have never ever done before, and you'll see what I mean at the end. This week, we learn who the mysterious people on the island of the Datenseki are, and it is a group of sorcerers that have long been separated from society and who benefit from a special rock substance that allows them to have a technological and military advantage over those who live around them. And yes, if this is sounding familiar to you, that is because it is. It's Wakanda. It's Japanese Wakanda. Anyway, negotiations break down because of the Wakandans' maximalist demands, and it looks like a fight will soon break out. Interesting implications. I mean, I know that it was going to be a bit of a crazy leap if they went for the alien route, so the fact that it's just sort of like a closed-off society makes a little bit more sense. The fact that they use bugs, I think, will be very important to the power that the Magatsumi has. It's probably this combination of what they're able to do and what they can do. So that'll be interesting to see how it all works out. The final regional tournament begins, and Yusa is bringing all of the aura he can muster, but he is frustrated because everybody deals with him with admiration and basically gives up before trying. Taiki, meanwhile, is getting supporting messages from literally all of the main characters of the series. He runs into Yusa again inside and throws down the gauntlet to him, saying that he is going to be the one to win in the end. Also, younger brother Haruto also lays down his gauntlet, which is exactly what older brother Yusa wanted to hear. Now the competition will begin in earnest. The vibes that this series is about to end is literally oozing off of the page. So much of this chapter felt like we were kind of doing a main character roundup. Honestly, it's not even something I'm annoyed about. I feel like, as I mentioned previously, we're kind of naturally arriving at the conclusion of this series as I would have expected to see it. So, I'm just happy with whatever they decide to do to wrap up the series. The moldy Uzun family boy has come up and is showing off his devastating powers. Those powers include being able to cause real damage to the Uzun family estate and is doing a number on Squad 9 and pals. Things are starting to look really dire when Yodaka shows up and gets a good punch in on the moldy boy, and the fight will really begin in earnest next week. Will the mission be just to get everyone out of the Uzun family mansion now? How else will the moldy boy's nearly decade in confinement make his screws loose? How will Yodaka react to actually hearing Op's voice and not just the fake Op in his head? I think, I predict a funny gag they may do is having the real Op's voice and then the fake Op's voice kind of talking to each other in Yodaka's head. That would actually be quite funny. Anyway, another really fun chapter this week, just confirming that this series is always a really fun one to read. There was no chapter for Witch Watch this week. Shishiba and Electricity Guy's fight is literally lighting up the night and is involving the whole of the castle that they have been blasted to. Electricity Guy is pulling out all of the stops, but that is not enough to take out Shishiba, and he uses his strength and ability to maintain an upper hand during the fight. Electricity Guy destroys Shishiba's hammer, but he is immediately able to get a sword to use. He then uses this to channel the electricity away from him and stabs the Electricity Guy through the chest. This was a fantastic chapter with great action. The art is really back to being the best that it can be, so I'm excited to see where we end up going from here. It looks like we're going to have a full-on fight this chapter. Okay, so Maxwell, it turns out, has a basically invulnerable body. He has bones like steel and muscles like Kevlar, apparently, and is fully fighting Haiji at this point. Haiji tries to fight back, but his aggressive pressure point poking is not effective. Maxwell had a run-in with Haiji before, as it seemed like he wanted to have some sort of, he wanted to see if he was invulnerable or if he had some sort of vulnerability. But when Haiji tells him that he sees no lights on his body, he gets upset. He blasts Haiji into another room, and Haiji is turning his own power against himself to try to give himself a power-up for the fight to come. Well, I am hoping that this series is able to maintain a kind of middle ground between the fighting and the medical drama stuff. My sincere hope is that it does not just turn into a generic fighter sort of manga. that's not really what I want from it. I liked that it had this sort of, medical drama, more serious take on things. But let's see where we go from here. This week, Mizuo and Mimei take a break from goofing off to actually do their studies. But don't worry, they are able to get in plenty of shenanigans in the meantime. While studying, they run into a few of the other listeners who make it very hard to study, but Mizuo is able to get through a decent amount of her work, and Mrs. Shrimp vows to give it her all for the next listener, Koshin, to see how far she can go before she goes back to preparing for college entrance exams. This chapter was a pretty simple one, but it was still cute. Okay, so the Council of 12 ends, and there is just a bunch of oddballs there. We aren't even properly introduced to any of them at all. So I don't know who they are or what they do or how they're important. It seems like they're all heads of guilds, but a lot of them knew Gene before he was a head of the guild, and some of them seem kind of surprised that he is a head of the guild, so maybe they're not heads of guilds. I don't know. There was a lot of weird stuff going on there. Either way, we learn from there that magic users are disappearing. And what do you know? When we jump back to Kinato and the gang, some of those abductors just show up and start causing a bunch of mischief and destroying things. Kinato tries to help, but immediately gets smashed back. And faced with the inadequacy of his power, he decides to use his magic on himself to power himself up and delivers a huge blow to the bad guys. All right, this chapter, in my opinion, was a huge step back for this series. First off, stop introducing characters. Seriously, this is quickly going beyond a big cast and is just becoming unmanageable. We don't even know people's names anymore. They just become these weird singular gags or these archetypes, and we haven't even spent enough time with our main characters to know anything about them. So we don't know anything about our main characters. We keep getting introduced to all this cast of people coming in, and they shuffle in and out from one scene to another, and we're just like, I don't know who that person is. I don't remember their name. I maybe remember one small little thing about them, don't know their powers, whatever. And then secondly, why, oh why, are you just jumping right to making Kinato some basic boy shonen protagonist? The thing that was new and interesting about this series was the idea that it was going to focus on someone who was a support character. Someone who used their magic not to fight, at least only sparingly fight, and instead used their powers to help others bring out the best of their abilities. Instead, you've just abandoned that, apparently, and are making this a regular shonen series. The last panel even just looked like Deku. I mean, I don't see why you would have needed to abandon what you were already working with. It was fine. Anyway, I'm not a fan of this chapter. Kana has gone to Himari to report on her failure, and you know what? Iamori also tells his little sister that he rejected Kana, even though she was in Kana's camp all along. Man, this series is also taking the whole thing so seriously and earnestly. It's honestly really endearing of this series as a whole. Again, this is another one of those moments where this series is doing something that I don't really expect. I mean, we kind of were given this impression that it was going to be, a typical harem thing. And typically when you're doing a harem thing, you have to either extend things out or you have to lead people on or whatever. But that is just this. It's weird to say, but this is what somebody who was mature would have to do in a situation if you had multiple people who were interested in you and were actively pursuing you, and there was only one person that you were actually interested in. Iamori is kind of doing what a person in that situation would do. He's being a little bit maybe too nice to the girls at times, but I mean, other than that, he's treating this with seriousness that I wouldn't expect of a harem protagonist, and I like that about this series. That said, Himari is taking the opportunity to throw her own hat into the ring, and at least is being quite a bit more subtle about it. Let's see if she can claim her main character-ness and the title name rights going forward, or if it was just a massive head fake all along. Kiyoshi and Bobo's fight continues, and we learn about his powers. Actually, Bobo just lays out the whole thing himself. What he is able to do is lend power to demons and then force them to pay it back to him with interest. This gives him a huge bank of power in reserve that he can call in to help him out with a variety of things, including just giving him, more of his battery back, or he can revive himself. There's a variety of stuff. It's a pretty useful power. This could be bad news, but Kiyoshi has also received a power-up, so he just needs to exercise the baddie 99 times and then he'll be good. This chapter had some fairly funny moments. Not bad. It was fine. The alien headbutting continues. This week, Shirakiba uses a chain to link himself to the alien and is dragged up in the air and all around the place. But using a leg lock is enough to get his head close to the alien and perform many, many alien headbutts. Then off in the distance, we see some other aliens who are lurking around and watching some fun wrestling action. Silly enough and fun enough. Let's see where the wrestling fun times will go from here. Okay, we have a new series starting this week, and this one is about a science boy going out to prove that curses and such are just a bunch of nonsense. But unfortunately for him, curses are real in this world, and his little seal-breaking activities were enough to release the spirits, and they come to accost him as he's falling asleep. These spirits include Sachiko the second curse, Ultra the fifth curse, Gavaudian the fourth curse, Kaganeji the third curse, and Johan the first curse. But our main character is confused, not simply due to the fact that there are now curses in his house, but due to the fact that he did not even perform the rituals correctly. Comically incorrectly, as a matter of fact. But these curses seem pretty loose about their requirements, and they accept everything that was done, and it seems like they also mention later that they kind of intentionally made the rituals that were passed down wrong, and the way that he did them wrong actually kind of was exactly what needed to be done. I don't know, it was kind of squishy, but it doesn't really matter. And it should have been that he was cursed to death for doing it correctly, but their curses ended up canceling each other out, so he's cool, and now he just has 5 new housemates. So, with these 5 unintended housemates in tow, they start to get into some hijinks. So Sachiko decides to raid his shoujo manga collection and then just the rest of his manga collection, and she seems kind of otaku-coded. Then you have Kaganechi, who is making food for the sick grandma, and general hilarity ensues around the house with the rest of them. But our main character would be free of all of this nonsense if he can identify the grudge or hatred or regret or whatever the strong feeling that caused the curse to remain around. And so we clearly are embarking on a journey to free the curses. That'll probably be the general gist of things. I imagine they're probably going to join him out in the world or whatever, because they mention that their power is stronger around him, so they'll probably show up at school or something. We also get a title drop in the first chapter. I almost guarantee there's going to be a heroine character that's going to be introduced in the next chapter. So this seems like it'll be a comedy, and it was decently funny for the first chapter. I thought that the art was actually pretty decent too. But we'll have to see where and how the series will go from here. All kinds of different directions this thing could take. I think it might be an interesting thing to read, but it wasn't a series where I was like, oh man, this is going to be great. It was just like, okay, I see where, I see where this kind of fits in. Let's see where we go. All right, so we have finally, mercifully, come to the end of this series. Let's do a review of this week's chapter, and then I can get to eulogizing the Mage Next Door. Honestly, not much of it came across for me this series. The broad strokes of the chapter is that there was a bit of a flash forward, jumping past the conclusion of the big fight with the big bad. But it seems like the big bad guy was able to get away along with all of the other bad guys. So it's going to be like, oh, we're going to get them in the future. Then we jump forward, and Osoegawa is helping people, and he is starting to reconjure the useless spells that he had before. So I guess that's something of a nice narrative end. But let's get to eulogizing the mage next door. This series spent a lot of its runtime frustrating me, unfortunately. It was something I was very interested in, and I was very interested in this series from the first chapter. In fact, I thought that it showed enough promise that I was happy to jump it up my personal read order for the magazine overall. This was just about before I was doing my, this weekly Shonen review. Then basically from that point on, it was just a nosedive down to the bottom. It never got as bad as Gonron Egg, in my opinion, which really didn't have nearly as high of a high point as this series had. But its biggest issues were issues that I identified pretty early on in this series, and they are the lack of creativity with the magic. The original setup for this series provided us with a mage who had basically an unlimited supply of useless spells to pull from, and he would encounter a horde of mages who themselves were causing problems, and he would have to use his smarts to creatively get over the bad guys. This idea is interesting, but it was not explored at all. And in fact, fairly quickly it was abandoned for a spell that functioned like a big blast of energy and, just throwing everything at his foes when things get wrong. And I'm talking about the spell that turns the water guns into big beams. I mean, that was basically just like a beam of magic. Then at the end, he goes to, get his super hydro cannon blast magic beam, and the original plan for the series was totally abandoned. The second thing, issues with the art. For most of this series runtime, the art for the characters lacked expression or dynamism. It seemed like each character had one stock face, or charitably had two stock faces, and then the mangaka just cycled through each of those depending on what the situation required. And this just became more and more obvious as you were reading the whole chapter. You just quickly became to realize, their faces aren't changing. They're making the same face. Osoegawa had the bored face, the heroine had the shocked face, and that was just the faces that they had. Also, for a while, the mangaka had a problem with the ratio of the head to the bodies, so the heads looked really tiny. I know it seems like a small thing, but it just kind of added up over time that it definitely felt like there wasn't a lot of things that were being creative done with the characters, and you felt it over time. Add on to these issues was just a lack of well-written dialogue or a compelling overarching story, and this series became a struggle from start to finish. I won't even knock it too hard for the extremely sharp turn that we took at the end of the series. I fully expect that was the result of the mangaka knowing that his series was about to end and taking it to a conclusion that was either something that was wanted to get to eventually or something that they could be happy with at the end of the day. I think that this is a real shame because, as I said, from chapter 1, I think that this series showed promise. But I am not at all surprised that it got the axe. And I'm sorry to say, I think it was deserved. I would have dropped this series earlier had it not been for me knowing with absolute certainty that it was ending soon. Just from the fact that they took that really sharp turn, I pretty much knew at that point that the end was pretty close, and then the next chapter or two kind of confirmed my suspicion, and then this chapter ultimately confirmed the fact that it was true that this series was ending. So if it wasn't for that, I think there's a high possibility that I would have dropped it a little bit sooner. And that is it for the chapters this week. Rankings are coming up above my head now. This week, I have done something that I have never done before. and that is to give a tie ranking for the top series this week. With the long-awaited introduction of Imu and the beginning of Akane's God of Death story, literally, it just felt wrong trying to separate them. Thus, I will make a one-time exception and give both of them a number 1 ranking this week. I hope to do the best I can on putting up my Q1 video as well. So I've been putting together a video to summarize the Q1 reviews that I have done for this year. I have it filmed and I'm in the process of editing it. So I hope to get it out soon. And then I'm going to also divide it into each of the series so that those videos will also be available. So you can just watch those as well. The new series looks interesting. And there is another one that is planned for next week. So we have a lot of new blood in the magazine. Let's see how it all shakes out for these new series. Let's see if any of them have the staying power to keep going, or if we're, gonna shuffle the deck again in a few months. Anyway, that's it for me. Thank you all for watching this video. Hope to see you again in the next one.